Sabres Live is presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime.
Sabres Live overtime, and what a weekend it was. Busy from a standpoint of roster cuts after a 3-1 win over Pittsburgh on Saturday. And when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo with the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos betting counters are open daily, and self-service betting kiosks are open 24/7 at all three locations. Whether you visit Seneca, Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek, the Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens so you never miss a play. The Sportsbook at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. Marty Baron, it really is me, in case you were wondering, just basking in the glow of another preseason victory for Buffalo.
I think I may have the same glasses. Is this similar to yours?
If you have the same glasses, then we are truly a married couple, not just a duo.
Okay.
We would because I've had these are prescription Oakleys that I've had for almost 10 years. My optometrist said the other day, how can you possibly see out of those things? So anyway, here I am.
These are Under Armour that we got at the alumni fishing event a few years back. So that's why I thought maybe you got those two. But
if you thought about that a little bit further, you would know that Razor never invites me to that event. So I would be unlikely to have those.
That's because you're a golfer, not a fisher. That's the way it works. You always go to the golf tournament.
And he's a fisher, not a golfer.
Well, maybe he's cooking the hamburgers at that event. But anyway, yes, okay. The game at home that the Sabres played against the Pittsburgh Penguins was, I felt, the best pace that we've seen so far in preseason out of the Sabres. Yes, they had a pretty good lineup when you consider that Thompson, Olofsson, Cousins, Krebs, Hinostroza, Asplund were all in the lineup with Power, Jokiharju, Lyubushkin. So there was a lot of pace. Pittsburgh didn't have Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Carter. They didn't have any of those guys. But still, I felt that it was a very high-intensity game, a lot of skating, a lot of pace. And I felt that was a good sign for the Sabres to what Don Granato said. Okay, we need to push these guys now. I felt they responded well in the push in game number 4 of the preseason.
As expected, cuts came afterwards. Might have come a little quicker than we anticipated, but here we are in a brand new week with 2 preseason games to go. The Sabres are 3-1. They've trimmed the roster. Were there any surprises for you to the cuts that were made? And obviously, I'm going to take a great assumption here that a lot of people already know the cuts. Let me quickly go through them. Byro, Seiderquist, Kizikov, Kozak, Kulik, Murray, Roseanne, Rusek, Weisbach, Laxinen, Jobst, Mersch, Olszewski, Passelt, Warren, Berzola, Elliott, Prow, Tischke, Hauser, and Warm. Not to mention Matt Savoy, loaned back to his junior club, Winnipeg, in the WHL.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by any of the cuts, to be honest with you, because we talked about my lines last week on Sabres Live, and I didn't have any of those guys in my lines, right? So the one that people may say, well, what about Matt Savoy? Maybe an extended look. Look, Matt Savoy did well in, the prospect challenge and in training camp for the Sabres, but it just not to the level that you would say, is he fighting for a roster spot? And you also have to expect that, like, he had shoulder surgery at the end last season, more rehabbing than getting into the action this summer, had to miss out on the World Juniors, had to miss out on development camps. So I think that kind of maybe, I don't want to say stopped him, but put his chances a little bit back. I thought he was going to come out and really show us something great. They showed us something good, but not good enough to keep on. Anyone
exceed your expectations so far that got reassigned?
In those that are cuts? Well, yeah, I think Seiderquist, I really liked his game. Byro, I really liked his game. I felt that Kozak really, really liked his game. I was happy to see Weisbach at the level that he was at. So there was a lot of guys that exceeded my expectations. But again, I look at it and I say, oh, I can't wait to see those guys in Rochester. I can't wait to see what the Amerks are going to put together, because I feel that after the really good year the Amerks had last year, we felt there was going to be a bit of a dip this year. No, I feel like this young talent infusion that's in is going to be really good for the Amherst. So a few guys impressed me, not enough to stay, but enough to give me the wow, Amherst are going to be good this year.
So there's 16 forwards remaining in Sabres camp here as we have this final week with preseason games, one of which on MSG tomorrow, Tuesday night, 6:30 for our coverage as Carolina's in, and then the preseason concludes on Friday as Buffalo is in Pittsburgh. Season opens on October 13th, home to the Ottawa Senators. There's 16 forwards remaining, Marty. That includes Sean Malone, who is yet to get in a game. So does this mean that Peterka and Quinn have made it?
I don't want to say
assuming that we're going to start the season with 14 forwards on the 23-man roster.
Yeah. So, and I'm assuming Sean Malone is on the 16 right now because he was injured and hasn't gotten really himself going. So as soon as I would feel Sean Malone is healthy, probably make his way down to Rochester as well. So that leaves my sheet with 15 forwards and only one needing to go down. That includes Anders Bjork, Riley Sheahan. Now, if you want to put Quinn and Peterka into that conversation, Hinestroza in that conversation, I think Vinny is here, and I'm not worried about it. But I think one out of the four that I've talked about will most likely go back to Rochester. As I am talking right now, I would suggest that, yes, Quinn, Peterka, in my opinion, would start the season in Buffalo because there's no reasons, in my opinion, to say, let's keep Bjork and Sheahan as the extra two forwards. Why don't you give Quinn and Peterka some time to play early in the year and see where they're at? Maybe Bjork is an extra forward. I don't know who the other extra guy is going to be, but I think you can find somebody to say, hey, it may not be like that all season long, but at the start of the season, we want to see the young guys play. So I would think that even though last week I didn't have Peterka in my four lines, but maybe he's an extra forward starting the season. But I would suggest that Quinn and Peterka are in good position right now to start the year in Buffalo.
Fair to say Quinn, and we might have said this last week, fair to say Quinn is ahead of, on the impression meter in this camp, ahead of Peterka and Krebs?
Yes, I was actually going, as you said, fair to say that Quinn, I'm going to go back to last week saying Quinn, Peterka, and Krebs are maybe in that same bag, and you have to reach in and pull the card out. And I think Quinn is the first card that I'm pulling out. Krebs, even against Pittsburgh, listen, I didn't see a whole lot of Peyton. He was on the wing that game. I think he needs to give me something more. There's 2 games left. You talked about Carolina on Tuesday, Pittsburgh again in the last game of the preseason. I want to see more out of Krebs. He could be in jeopardy to be down the lineup or maybe out if he doesn't get himself going again. So there's guys that stood out in the game against Pittsburgh on Saturday afternoon, that was, but Krebs was not one of them.
Ukko, Pekka, Luukkonen. Usually we resort to 3 letters, but I'm going the full distance there on 3 big words. Strong performance, no?
Very strong performance. Let me ask you this. Is it faster to say UPL or Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? I feel like we speak faster when we say Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Exactly.
And it's great, but great performance from UPL or Luukkonen or whatever you want to say. Things that worry me about Luukkonen. One is I feel that his form breaks down quickly. It's almost like he's losing all his core strength, his body composure, and his form breaks down really rapidly. Did not happen against Pittsburgh. It actually was the other side where he made some saves on recovery and unexpected pucks that were bouncing back, where he kept his form and was able to use his lateral movement and his flexibility and his great ability to cover the low ice to his advantage. And the other thing is on screens, deflections, long shots, I always find it in the past that he didn't fight enough for those. We were sitting on the press box with Paul Hamilton, and I said, look at this, like he's fighting for that puck. Look at that, he's fighting for that puck. So I was very impressed. Even though Pittsburgh did not have a great lineup, they had some glorious scoring chances, and he responded really, really well in that game. So enough to say, hey, he's part of the roster on opening night? No, it's going to be Anderson and Comrie. But enough to say, listen, he's ready for this season. He worked hard all summer. He's ready for this season. It's a great sign to see.
Yeah, unfortunate for him to lose the shutout late, but the game was actually decided probably by his play at 5-on-5. When you dive into the analytics for whatever, I mean, you might be described as a sick person for wanting to do that in a preseason game, but the 5-on-5 high danger chances were decidedly in Pittsburgh's favor. And Buffalo got so many of their good looks by having twice as many power play opportunities as the Penguins had. So it was a real, testament, I thought, to Luukkonen for consistency throughout where the game was played at 5-on-5. So there's another component of the team that we've not yet talked about, and we'll do so quickly because I don't think there's any change imminent here. But the fact of the matter is, after the reassignments on Saturday, there's 11 defensemen left in camp, including Prisky, Clegg, and Davies. Has Chase actually altered the conversation among those vying for the 7-8 spot on the team, with 8 obviously not guaranteed to be staying with the team when it breaks for the regular season? If you again want to go the analytics path and marry it with the eye test, Prisky has had a really nice 3 preseason game showing so far.
Yeah, he's looked really good. I would say the quick answer to your question is no. There's too many bodies in line right in front of him, in my opinion. This is more where you have 2 games left. Are you going to play Dahlin, Power, Jokiharju, Samuelson, Lyubushkin, and all 2 of those games? No, you're probably going to play half of them one game, half of them the other. So you need bodies to fill out the rest of the 6 defensemen that are going to play. But you also want to give a reward to those that have performed well. So I still think that the battle for 7 and 8 and the Sabres depth is Fitzgerald and Pilot, but Prisky, Davies, Clegg, these guys have looked good to earn themselves more time, a little bit more meal money, right? The per diem and train camp, put in your pocket. So they earned themselves that.
Amherst camp, of course, opening today, Monday, and on ice Tuesday, as Seth Appert's group will have preseason games this weekend. And you hinted at it earlier, so I'll ask the question specifically based on the fact that Seiderquist, Viro, Roseanne, Kisakov, Kozak, Rusek, Murray, Kulik, Weisbach, just to name 9, not to mention the captain and Malone potentially and others. Are you actually more excited for this upcoming Amherst season now than you were in the summertime?
Oh, absolutely. I thought you were going to ask me if I was more excited for the Amherst and the Sabres. I was going to say, well, no, but I can say that on certain nights where the Sabres are not playing, I am going to pay really close attention, drive down to Rochester. Maybe I'll drive along with you, Duffer, and we'll go catch a game or 2. But I am excited with the development path that the Rochester Americans set Appert, Michael Peckham, Mike Weber, assistant general manager, but general manager of the Amherst Hermanos and Kevin Adams have put together. Like a year ago, I would not have thought that much young talent could have shown up in a camp or in a season at the AHL. And now we're a year later, and I'm really excited for a lot of those guys and contracts that are given to 7th rounder, 6th rounder that are going to turn out to be really, really good asset moving forward.
Yeah, I actually want to, not to over dramatize this, but like part of me is shedding a tear here because the way I phrased it to you last week, like what has Lucas Rusek done wrong? Nothing. Brandon Biro was really good. Brett Murray, I mean, my goodness, I don't know, or it doesn't matter what your expectations were of Brett, but like last year, he was one of the talking points of camp because the team didn't have as many guys pushing and or showing the skill set that we just saw the last few weeks. And yet, amidst everybody talking about all these other names, I think Brett Murray was better this camp than he was last year.
He was really good this camp, but Duffer, there's so many good hockey players all over the place.
Elevate.
Friend of the show and podcast guest, Andrew Podorowski, was MVP in the playoffs, scoring leader, back-to-back Calder Cup champion. And this is the first time he's earned himself a one-way deal.
Yeah.
with Seattle. And so I'm
And
just
he's
looking
almost
around
30.
the league, and he's almost 30. I'm looking around the league at the talent, not just in the NHL, in the AHL. And then you look at the junior talent, the college ranks talent, and I'm like, you have to be given an opportunity and hang on to it and take it. And you have to work hard for those opportunities. So those young guys will get a great opportunity in Rochester to have the buzz and the success that they want to have.
Okay, so we're talking out loud and some won't believe it because it's their nature, and it's quite frankly probably our nature to overhype things sometimes. So where does the truth lie in all of this based on the fact that you have lived this experience, high prospect, NHL material, went to the AHL, you saw endless streams of talent in the AHL while you were there. So, like, are we wrong to think that in a reasonably short period of time, all this young talent can actually figure it out and the Amerks will benefit that much from this seemingly massive talent infusion?
I hate to say it, but I also went to the ECHL after the AHL and
Yeah, but that wasn't for
and
very long.
I mean,
that was like a spring break.
It was because of an injury to Mike Bales, current goalie coach of the Sabres, because I would never have gone back to Rochester that year, I believe. But anyway, neither here or there. Here's the thing. And this gets discussed between players, not at the rink, not on the bus, but maybe back in the apartments or over dinner or lunch or whatnot, or after a few, beers late at night, is players also understand that in a year or maybe two for certain of those, so many of them, they'll have to go through waivers. So this is an opportunity right now for Rochester to really get good and for the Sabres to evaluate them, because there will be decisions to be made as to when it comes to not only the Byro and the Weisbach and the Rusek and the Kulik and the Savoy and all those guys, Siderquist, in a few years when you may lose them to waivers, but that's going to impact players right now on roster spots in Buffalo that you're like, hey, can you take a $3.5 million player and replace them with $975,000 and have the same result because of their development? So I think that's where the big decisions are going to happen. They're not happening now because all those guys are going through, they don't have to go through waivers. They're just going down to Rochester, drive an hour, and they're there. In a year, and some of them 2 years from now, it will be a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how it unfolds there. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed within the group or groups now, Sabres and Amerks, that you feel needs a quick mention?
Yes, Dylan Cousins was really good once again against Pittsburgh, and I really like this camp. I like his quickness, his passing, his shooting. I've liked everything I've seen out of Dylan Cousins this year, so that was great. Tage Thompson was really good, I thought. He had the laser. He was feeling confident with the one-timer, broke a stick, did not score off the back wall like he did in Chicago, but, we were laughing about that. I thought Rasmus Asplund looked really good in the game. He played center, which – we've been talking about who's going to be the fourth line center this year. Asplund has not looked good at center in the NHL setting the last few years. He looked good in this game, so I was happy to see him play well. And Jack Quinn, for the first time in training camp this year, I'm like, wow, okay, there's Jack Quinn that, he missed a wide open net and shot it off the outside of the net on the power play. A little bit more like his goal against Washington in the preseason. He was right off the side and ready to bounce on it. But I thought Jack Quinn looked better. So those are the guys that I'm happy they're taking a step forward, like Don Granato wanted them to.
I'm hitting you with a surprise here. We often end with 3 stars. I'm going to say just give me 3 of anything. They don't have to be stars. They can just be 3 random thoughts. They could be 3 product placements. They could be 3 whatever you want.
Okay, here's my number one thing, because I'm not usually on the press box with you. And I was polling the crew to see if it was okay to grab multiple popcorns on the press box. And apparently it's not. You get one and that's it. Leave some for the rest. So that was the one thing I thought was funny. I was really hungry and I wanted a second popcorn. I decided to have a second helping of cookies instead. So that's one.
The veteran move right there.
A veteran move. 2, when we were in the elevator to go back down after the game, I was interested to see that both Ron Extall and Brian Burke were in Buffalo evaluating the young players. There was no Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Carter. There was none of that. But Ekstall and Burke were there evaluating the young prospects or players on the Pittsburgh side, which, I always, there are people in hockey that Brandberg's been around forever. Ron Ekstall, I remember him as a goalie in Quebec City. I looked up to him. So I was like, I gave him the nod, like, hey, Ron, how you doing? Yeah, okay. Like he said, Marty, and he waved down. So that was observation number 2. And observation number 1, UPL was really good. Look, I always fascinate towards goaltenders. Tristan Jarry was really, really good in that game. I've said I think Pittsburgh is going to take a step back, but if Jarry plays at the level that he can, they may be a tough go again in the Eastern Conference this year.
Well, that's their hope. And when I say there, I mean Hextall, Burke, Crosby,
yes,
Malkin, Letang,
Sullivan,
all the contracts,
yes.
man. Like, I mean, this team is not sitting down. It's so funny when you think back to when those two were hired and what was supposed to happen. Burke and Hextall are going to navigate them through the transition, life after Crosby and or Malkin. And they ended up keeping the band together. And despite what it says on their birth certificate, I can't argue with you. I think they'll be very good.
It was the only decision to make. And I heard Brian Burke in an interview this summer. He said, how close was Malkin to leaving? He says, he was close. He was close enough that he was taking calls. But when he looked at all of it and we wanted him to stay, we made the offer and he looked at our roster and says, I want to stay. So Malkin was really close to leaving. Out of the 3, he was the one that was on his way out.
All right. What do you think my 3 things are going to be?
Music.
Yeah. It's really only one thing there, big guy. So I've actually had to start writing down which concerts I've been to this year, because people always ask, like, hey, you been to any good shows lately? And I'm like, yeah. And then I can't remember them. So, maybe it's a post-COVID hangover, like I'm overindulging now, getting caught up, but it was a pretty good weekend. I mean, one of my all-time favorites, the Gaslight Anthem, was at Rapids Theater in the Falls. And the only downside to it was I probably knew like 10% of the audience and was like texting with everybody, but I never actually made FaceTime with everybody because it was just one of those weird nights where, and then I felt kind of guilty walking away from there. It's like, I should have seen this person, should have seen that person, but anyway, it was super fun. They'll never change. And that's a great thing. But I will say this, and you'll remember this because we had the great fortune just before COVID of being on a Sabres road trip that included an extended stay in Fort Lauderdale. So during that trip, there was a Riptide music festival on the beach for 2 days, of which you didn't, but we could have. Anyway, I was there for 1 full day. Matt Mason performed early on that afternoon. If you can imagine, which is hard to do if you haven't actually lived it, like imagine a stage on the beach, like looking out to the Atlantic Ocean. Like, I don't know how natural and insane this must feel for an artist. Anyway, so it's midday. I mean, decent crowd, but still, you're looking out to the Atlantic Ocean. I was convinced that Matt Mason's voice could have carried clear across the Atlantic. He stood out that much to me. And then COVID hits, right? And I'm like, well, when we get back to normal, I am going to see this guy. And he played a sold-out show at the Ballroom on Saturday night. Within 4 songs, was texting a group of friends who also love music. I said, well, you are missing out on the greatest town ballroom show you will ever see. And that there was nothing forcing my commentary or feelings in the form of substance. It was genuine excitement. This sold out show, younger crowd, everybody singing along. And despite his incredible first impression on me 3 years ago, he so exceeded them. And
That's awesome.
he started with my absolute favorite song, Nelson Wood Lane, which I never in a million years would have thought well, you can't open the show with this song because it's not like high tempo. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And then it just got better from there. So anyway, so I'm
I gotta start hanging out with you because
yeah,
I'm gonna learn a lot about music that way. So that's good.
I'm living in a euphoric state at the moment. So anyway, thank you for this. We look forward to obviously doing this. And when we say this, we mean Sabres Live Overtime, acronym SLOT, which is nice. We're going to be doing this on Mondays because let's be honest here, like we've got football Mondays all the way through what we hope is to February. So it makes sense to just keep things going, come off a busy hockey weekends, and we'll hit you in podcast form on Mondays and then get back into our traditional radio and television shows on Tuesday through Friday. We do so with a terrific crew as always, Marty, and we thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you on Tuesday.